Hello, friends. My name is Jen Bradovich. I'm Chief Curator at Print Center, New York. It is great to be here today. I see some old friends. I see some new faces, which is also great. I also see a couple of faces that I've seen about 75 times in the last week. So thank you for making it out for another fantastic Print Week event here in Brooklyn for this inaugural fair. I'm also excited to introduce this talk because it's going to be the first time that I hear these three speakers in conversation together, and so I'm thrilled to be here as well, and I know you're going to enjoy it. Before I introduce the talk and the speakers, I just want to give thanks and hope you'll join me in recognizing everyone who made this possible. This fantastic fair, Luther, and the whole back of house, front of house, everybody here at Powerhouse. Let's just do a round of applause for them. Your dedication to building a community for printmaking is very felt and seen, and so we just want to thank you for that. And also for Powerhouse for inviting Print Center to collaborate in the form of this talk. And thanks to Jackie for coordinating Deesh's whole sound and tech crew, the folks doing interpretation and cart. Thanks all for being here. So today, we are going to hear from William Villalongo, Shraddha Ramani, and Tiffany Barber on the topic of a tremendous collaborative project that Will and Shraddha have been working on for a couple of years now. This is a portfolio called Printing Black America, Du Bois' Data Portraits in the 21st Century. And this is a really sweeping project, drawing on legacies of W.E.B. Du Bois' data visualizations from about the year 1900. These were groundbreaking works, not only of sociology and research method about Black life and what that was like during and following failures of Reconstruction, but also sort of these proto-modernist works, as Tiffany calls them, in thinking about how to communicate information, how to communicate data, and also just make these really beautiful images, which I think you're going to hear more about. And most importantly, for this project, they continue to have tremendous resonance today. Now, Will and Shraddha's project, it's 30 images. You're going to hear all about this, and it's kind of mind-boggling because it is made in collaboration with 6 print shops across the US. Some of them are here, some are at IFPDA or other places, I'm sure, but just to shout them out, Graphic Studio, is anybody from Graphic Studio here? Anyone from Island Press here? No Island Press today? We miss you, Island Press. Let's see, High Point Editions over in the front area over here. We also have Paulson Fontaine, I know they're uptown today. And Maloney Printing Company out in Oregon. Now, there was a Zoom with all the print shops recently, and I was told that they were chatting about whether this has ever been attempted before, something of this scale, and I think the print nerds were doing the research and saying probably never. And I don't know if it's ever going to be attempted again. It's pretty tremendous. So why is Print Center presenting this talk? I'm excited that this portfolio is going to be on view at the George Schnitzer Gallery at Print Center, New York this fall in an exhibition called Data Consciousness, Reframing Blackness in Contemporary Print, curated by Tiffany Barber. The show is sort of going to be anchored spatially by the complete set, the complete edition, you know what, it's Saturday and Print Week, you know? How are you all doing? The complete portfolio of Printing Black America. And then there are also these, what Tiffany calls spurs, that are taken up thematically by other contemporary artists in the show. And those artists are Silas Monroe, Tahir Hemphill, Julia Mallory, and Camila Janan Rashid. So the show really thinks about data and how data, it has this impact on our lives and how it is in part of this complex interplay with race and technology and representation in our world. It's going to be accompanied by public programming at Print Center, including a symposium, and also there will be a publication with Herma Verlag that documents not only the exhibition and the show, but also the portfolio that Will and Shraddha are making. And I just want to thank everyone who's been working on this project. It's been really tremendous. Will and Shraddha for bringing it to us, Tiffany for doing a tremendous job on the show, and the supporters who are making it possible, including the Turina Endowment Fund and the Terra Foundation. So I'll see all of you in September at Print Center for that. And no pressure to the printers, but I do need the works done in time. But a BAT is fine. So now that you're excited, please welcome our speakers. Will Villalongo is an artist whose paintings, works on paper, and sculptures are concerned with representing the Black subject against notions of race and explore metaphors of mythology, wayfinding, and liberation. His work is featured in notable institutional collections. He is represented by Susan Inglett Gallery, and he's associate professor at Cooper Union. Shraddha Ramani is an urbanist and researcher whose data visualization and map-making work promotes resilient and equitable cities. Her work focuses on democratizing data to empower communities. She works at NYC's Department of Transportation. And leading this conversation, or moderating this conversation, will be Tiffany Barber, an interdisciplinary scholar and curator who focuses on visual and performing arts of the Black diaspora working in the United States and the broader Atlantic world. She is assistant professor of African American art at UCLA and the author of Undesirability and Her Sisters, Black Women's Visual Work and the Ethics of Representation, out next month, in May, out in May. Welcome our speakers and enjoy this really interesting conversation.
Thank you so much for that beautiful introduction. Super excited to be here. Thank you all for being here. I can't believe it's such a packed room. Well, I can believe it, but very exciting. So much enthusiasm around this project, and I'm so grateful to Will and Shraddha for inviting me to be part of this project in a curatorial capacity that started, the conversation for which started a couple of years ago now, year and a half, 2 years. And so they're going to give an overview of the project. They have images to show you. There are proofs in the back. If you didn't see them on your way in, please look at them on your way out, especially after the context of this conversation. And then I'll ask a few questions, and then we'll take some questions from you all.
Thanks, Tiffany. So thank you, Tiffany. Thank you, Jen. Thank you all to all the printmakers and print centers for Print Center and Powerhouse for making this all happen. So I'm going to take you guys through what Printing Black America is. Maybe I'm not pointing this to the right. There we go. Okay, so in 1900, Du Bois made this set of 65 data visualizations with his students at Atlanta University, Clark Atlanta right now, and he made a sort of exhibit in the fair called the Negro exhibit. This fair sort of is showing an industrializing Western nations and the kind of with, sort of the global South as a kind of foil for backwardness. And Du Bois was really showing this idea of progress for Black people after emancipation. And just to kind of get your head around that, in 1900, most people thought that after emancipation that the Black race would go extinct in the United States. But through data and using data at that point was very new way of using data to look at people. He was able to show this kind of image of progress. Did you want to add anything? Okay, so this. I will
just say that Du Bois's. I would love to add that Du Bois's. You can see some of the visualizations. I think at the bottom, especially, and he invited people to come and kind of flip through like a book. As you can see the display. So he's also thinking about exhibition design, which is really wild in 1900 for a sociologist who turns to art at a really critical time. And this period is also kind of in art history thought of as like the beginnings of the European avant-garde, but Du Bois was actually anticipating a lot of the things that white European male artists were doing and get valorized for now, still in the canon. But I'll also say that they were hand-drawn hand-drawn visualizations that are super important to
Yes,
uplift.
absolutely, hand-drawn visualizations. And you know, it's important to give the historical grounding. So what Printing Black America is a collection of 30 images. There are 5 portfolios, and there are 6 portfolios, and each portfolio has 5 images. This is the sort of breakdown of the project. So we have about 10 that are dedicated to local or living projects. So we're sort of foregrounding contemporary Black social scientists, activists, and scholars and their projects at the places that we're, or in the local communities that we're working in. So, and I should also say that the portfolio opens with 4 pages. One is an acknowledgement by Shraddha and I, a title page, an essay, or foreword, by the historian and artist, Nell Irvin Painter, and we have a poem by Langston Hughes called Madam and the Census Man that opens the full set. So this is us working most of the shops. We are on our way to Paul Maloney and Portland in a couple weeks, and then in June we're on our way to Paulson Fontaine in San Francisco. Graphic Studio, Island Press, Powerhouse, and High Point Center, we've already began the projects with them. I'm going to let Shraddha take everyone sort of through how we're reimagining the original Du Bois.
So the image here to the left is the original Du Bois. The way that we're thinking about this project is we consider each original Du Bois data visualization and then think about how we can update it for today. And so this original visualization was kind of like the opening opening image of the whole series, and he writes at the bottom, the problem of the 20th century is the problem of the color line, and the image is showing the roots of the transatlantic slave trade between the African continent and the Americas. And so he's kind of framing who the Black population is in America at the time, which is all descendants of the enslaved populations back in 1900. And so we started thinking about, you know, who is the Black population in the US today, which is still the descendants of, you know, the transatlantic slave trade, but also a quarter of the Black population in the US today is foreign-born or children of foreign-born people. So we thought it was important to forefront that in how we address this visualization. So we decided to use this map projection,
The Fuller projection?
Developed by Buckminster Fuller. It represents all of the land masses in proportion to each other and also shows them all as interconnected. And on here we have the red shows the transatlantic slave trade, similar to Du Bois's, but then the circles and lines show foreign-born Black people, where they're coming from throughout the world in the US today. And this is paired with a second visual that's a timeline of the Black population from 1790 to 2020.
So there's sort of 2 data sets there, the slave Atlantic, the trade routes, and the 2020 census information, right? 2020 census information of the Black population today, and where they come from. So, yeah.
And then this is Will upstairs here at Powerhouse working on another visualization. This one, if you go to the next slide, considers these 2 original Du Bois visualizations that are showing race amalgamation. The bottom one is in Georgia, and the top one is the United States, and it's showing the mixing of the black population with white. And it uses the terms mulatto, brown, yellow, which we obviously no longer use very much today, and so we were thinking about what that looks like today. And in the 2020 census, for the first time, the other, or like mixed race population really spiked. And so we thought that was, a relevant corollary to Du Bois's original. And so this visualization here shows the size of the mixed race Black population. So this first large circle is Black only, and then you're seeing Black with one other race, two other race, 3, 4, and then all mixed together. And then the Hispanic population is not, by the census, doesn't consider it a race, it's an ethnicity. And so we show that with the red blobs here.
Does anybody know when the census started allowing folks to check mixed race as a racial identity? Because I think that's also fairly newish. I don't think it was 2020, but maybe close.
I think it was like 2000, or it's
sometime in the last, yeah, okay.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
definitely
and
this
actually,
century.
up until 1960, the census taker would decide what race a person was by looking at them, and it was only after that that a person could self-identify.
So I mentioned that we are doing local projects. So this is us on the Island Press, I should say, at WashU. And we are working with Robin Prouty, who is the founder and director of DeSLU, or Descendants of the St. Louis University Enslaved. So through a separate research project that Robin took part of, partially funded by the Jesuits, who are kind of on a truth and reconciliation project, and they are supporting nonprofits who are interested in discovering the history of slavery by the Jesuits and all over the country. So she was part of this research project, and she was able to recover her family tree of the people enslaved by St. Louis University. So this is an example of what we got from Robin, which is this PDF of the family tree. There's 3 categories, which are born. I guess it's enslaved.
Enslaved by the Jesuits, enslaved by another, or born after emancipation.
Thanks. You have better eyesight than I do.
Can you go back to the one that was just before this one from Powerhouse?
Oh, yeah.
'Cause that's one of the proofs that's on the back
It
table.
is.
So
It is.
if you want, when it's time, but could you also highlight? Actually, go to the one where you're working on it, the image of you working on it.
Sure.
And what you're doing in this photo in this photograph.
Okay. We're not talking about that.
I'm just gonna. I think we can just keep it.
Yeah.
Because you have your images, and we'll stick to those. But
we'll slow it down. So right now, what I'm doing is I am actually just taking a paint marker, and I'm making a big squiggly on on a transparent Mylar sheet, I believe. I thought, as an artist, I thought, wouldn't it be, and this is kind of how we work, but I thought, wouldn't it be great if we could just make a big squiggly? That's like the greatest idea of like an amalgamation, like a big scribble. Like I want it to be a big scribble. And then Shraddha puts a lot of math on that scribble.
No, this is such an amazing image too,
Yeah.
because if you could go back to the one that juxtaposes the Du Bois and the current,
Yeah.
that this is like so vertical, obviously, and this is very round and atomic, and thinking about amalgamation, but also combustion. I think this is really evocative. So thank you so much.
And coming together, as a circle.
Exactly. Yeah. And I wanted, if you could just also highlight what the effects of not just the scribble, but also the specialty that comes through on this print that's maybe different than the high point in the other print workshops?
So we're using a lot of UV printing, so UV ink that then goes through this kind of, and sorry, John, if I messed this up, but going through almost like a heating process. So it's like that heats the UV coating, and we're doing this like a number of times, maybe 5 times. So you get this really thick welting of the ink, and it's shiny. It like really sits on top of the paper, a lot like if you've ever used a kind of paint marker. It looks a lot like an actual actual paint marker, the physicality of it. And yeah, and it is sitting, that one is sitting right back there. Okay, and it's only one more slide, I promise. Okay.
We have plenty of time. I just wanted to kind of like highlight things so we didn't have to necessarily flip back and forth, but go ahead.
Okay, so then we went from this PDF that Robin had been holding on to this. So we did, this is a dry point etching, I think I said that right, on and aquatint. Aquatint is a way that you kind of get like a tone in etching, and then the dry point is just sort of, or maybe it's intaglio, but I'm sort of just going straight to the plate, and I'm scraping with a stylus straight onto a still plate, and making this sort of tree-like form. So at the core, right, are those original people who came to St. Louis and then and were enslaved by the Jesuits, and about 4 generations of people who were sort of enslaved at St. Louis University, had children, and children had children. And Robin's nearest ancestors are like, that at the top all the way to the far right, that little circle there.
Can you talk a little bit about the both of you, what it means to do these deep dives and and have these prints that are hyper local, but then have this really global, these global implications, and how the local and the global are interacting in the portfolio? Because you have obviously these kinds of the images that you showed of the trade route itself, and I loved the kind of splaying of that out of the kind of adaptation of the Buckminster Fuller design. But also this is also kind of spiraling, and so visually there's things going on, but there's also this very hyper-local and global focus that's simultaneous in these prints. So I wanted to hear you all talk about that.
I can start. The original Du Bois data visualizations, at the time that he made them, he had been doing research in Philadelphia. He'd been doing these door-to-door data collection studies to understand how people lived how Black people lived, because that type of data was not being collected at the time. And so he's using his colleagues, his students, his own network to go out and collect data to understand what is going on with the Black population at the time. And we were very inspired by that, and we wanted to make sure to, keep that spirit, even though a lot of the work that he did is now collected in large national data sets like the census. We wanted to highlight that people are still doing this, very hands-on work, and so seeing projects like Robin's was very inspiring to us, And we wanted to, so 2 of each of our sets are local projects like this, and that's one of the reasons it's been amazing to travel all over the country, because originally, so Du Bois did a lot of his research in Georgia, and we really thought about this. We were like, is it something about Georgia? Should we be focusing there? And we had a lot of conversations, and then we came to the conclusion that that was just, back in 1900, that was the center of Black life, but now it's, Black people live all over the U.S. in all kinds of different, situations, and we wanted to make sure that was represented in our portfolio.
Can you, Shraddha, talk a little bit about terminology? I know that you have a unique relationship to the phrasing data visualization, and I wanted to hear you talk a little bit about that in terms of your own practice and how that came to play in the making of these portfolios.
Yeah, so I come from an urban planning background, and in my field, things have changed a lot in the last 10 to 15 years, but data is a very expensive thing to collect, and it takes a lot of skill to know how to use it and, make a case with data. And in urban planning, it's often real estate firms who have access to that type of data, and often communities are struggling to kind of make their case for something because they don't have the skills and don't have the knowledge, and so that's where I'm coming to data visualization from. And things have changed a lot in the last 10 or 15 years. There's more open data laws, like here in New York City, much of the data has become public, and more people are able to get their hands on it and do things, which is really great. But I think in other fields, that's still not the case. And so I wanted to make sure to bring that lens to the way we do these data visualizations.
Can you both also talk about what it's like to collaborate as the artist duo and couple? Because this is also your first project together, is that right? Or
Yeah.
maybe it's not, but okay. I'm like,
Yeah.
is this the first project together? And what has been like the dynamic and anything surprising or exciting that has come out of you all
I think
working
maybe the
together
wedding
in
was
this way?
the first project.
Yeah, right. I'm like the wedding and then the portfolios and then the baby.
Yeah. It's been really great. So just to give you a sense, we the conditions under which we came to this was 2020, and we live in Bed-Stuy, and half of our neighborhood was protesting, the George Floyd murder. But we were sitting here with this wonderful book by Whitney Battle, and I'm sorry, but I'm blanking on the partner editor.
Britt, I'm also.
Britt Russert.
Thank you. I was
Russert, thank you. This wonderful book where they went to the Library of Congress and took all these visualizations and digitized them and made this beautiful book. And I said, oh, wouldn't this be a great idea? This is the two things, this brings together two things that we could do. We just need a historian to make sure we're not just being flippant. But that kind of took us on this trajectory. But, I think it took a lot of understanding, you just asked her about what is data. That was my first question, how do I define these terms and and I think there's a lot of language and terminology, but also I think in terms of working, it becomes dinner conversation. At this point, it's how how are we gonna finish this, or what is this, it takes up a lot of our life, but it's been 5 years of having a conversation about Du Bois and having a conversation about each one of these visualizations. You wanna add?
It's been a real process. In the beginning, I would say that every visualization was an argument, because we would have to really get on the same page, and it would take days to get there. And now we kind of have a shared language and vocabulary, so that's great.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Can you talk a little bit also about the collaboration with the print shops themselves? And I know that each one of them has their own specialty, and of course they're located in different places, and what it's been like to travel to those places and to learn the technologies that are in those spaces, and how that collaboration has been working with the different print shops.
That's such a big question. It's well, there's the one thing where I think each shop kind of definitely maybe specializes, or I wouldn't say specializes, but they have a kind of signature in the types of things that they take on. And they also all work with lots of different types of artists, and so sometimes we're tapping into what those things are. Some shops are I would say really large in terms of all the things that they can do, and some focus on others. One of the wonderful things about going to different places is that often print shops are a kind of hub in their local communities. So it was actually kind of unbelievably easy to find local people who had projects and get a conversation going in a day of being anywhere. And I think it has a lot to do with what the print shop represents. We're seeing it upstairs too. It's a very natural sense of community. So those are the things that I kind of like, and you get a flavor of each town and a place you go just by being around the print shop. I think High Point is literally most of the space is a classroom, and the actual print shop where they do the work is maybe could fit on you're right. It's a very welcoming space. There's an exhibition space. So, yeah.
Awesome. I also wanted to hear you all talk a little bit about what it's been like to engage with this project over time, And in the last 5 years of ideating, conceptualizing, but then also now executing and bringing on new print shops and finding new partners to complete the portfolio. And have you garnered any insights, or has anything bubbled to the surface that you were just like, wow, that kind of surprised you or opened your mind to something else? And especially because this project is an extension of Du Bois's legacy, and it should, thinking about what Du Bois wanted to do when he first showcased the 65 data visualizations alongside, I think it was 350 around that number of photographs in the American Negro exhibition at the 1900 Paris exposition, which was itself a World's Fair, and I won't talk about, I won't get nerdy about our history there, but that was the beginning of, for him, was the beginning of a 100-year research agenda that he wasn't able to finish because he died in 1963. But now you all are taking up that mantle and transforming it for the 21st century. And so have there been any insights or anything that's percolated to the surface so far that was like, wow? Or also maybe disturbing?
Well, that's a lot.
Microphone, please.
Yeah, that's a lot to... There's so many aspects to that. I think one of the surprises that is the kind of how much putting together this project and making an argument for it, and then presenting that to these different shops, and how willing almost immediately people were, because I was like, this is crazy. And nobody's gonna do it. And shout out to Graphic Studio for helping us helping us make our original proposal less crazy than it was. Because I was like, we have to do all 65. Or like maybe 30. Maybe we could. There was this in the beginning of really kind of putting the ambition into something that actually could happen and kind of get done, and learning how to get something done like this. So that was a learning curve, and so I would say we just took the car and just bumped into everything, but we got here.
And we're still getting here because you're still working on new things, and I think we just you're going to start, like you said, going to the West Coast, Pacific Northwest, which I think will be really interesting because the Black population and the kind of history of Oregon as a sundown state is going to be really interesting for you all to draw things out. So I'm looking forward to hearing more about that when that happens. But I was also thinking that it might be nice to talk a little bit about how each of your practices has changed. We talked a little bit about collaboration and what that was like for both of you working together, but also have you thought about or seen any changes or evolutions in your own practice as you've been working through this project?
Do you want to?
I can start.
You can start.
I think when we started this project, I was working at New York City Emergency Management, and it was the height of COVID. So that was it was just a very welcome exit from that, to think about data and maps in a more creative way, and I think just being able to shape my own work and have control over all the ideas and timing and everything has been, it was just so very freeing. And then now I think I'm back to working at a city department, but I think I feel more like I have more of a voice and more of a portfolio that I can say oh, this is what I bring to this job. And I think,
yeah, I mean, I would say likewise in terms of how I can talk, or who I can talk, or what the work can encompass was surprising to me. So learning so much from Shraddha, especially ideas about language and breaking down, like you said, what is data and how does it affect our lives, allowed me to actually have conversations with people like Mabel Wilson, who I thought I was so intimidated, I was I can't talk to this person, about architecture or talk to them about data. But I found that through this project that was really it was really a bridge to between lessons in visual art and in science, and that those things live really naturally together, like so naturally together. It was like, that was pretty shocking. But in terms of practice, this is all I'm doing. I mean, right now, this is it. This is like, so it really became like, make my studio really has become about this project and about moving around to the country, to these print shops and making this work.
Well, that's not the only thing that's moving around this country.
Yes.
At the moment. I do want to also say that this project, even though Will is like, this is the only thing I'm working on, that's not necessarily true. But there's so many conceptual and material and aesthetic riches in this project that Shraddha has also been able to pull out. There's one of the artist proofs on the back table when you peruse them from the High Point portfolio, have these beautiful motifs from your practice that Shraddha has incorporated into the print as data points that would normally look at just like maybe a red dot or something if you were doing some kind of GPS mapping, but in fact are some iteration of some of the kind of floral motifs that circulate in your practice that you could also see at different museums, university museums around the country right now, because I think the last stop is coming soon to PAFA, yeah?
Yeah, Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Art in Philadelphia, May 15th.
Yes. So on that topic, and then we'll open up to questions from the audience, is what are the next steps and iterations for this project? What are you all thinking about its kind of future life at this stage? I know you can't project too far, but what's on the horizon for you all for this project for now?
I mean, well, right now we have two portfolios to work on, one in Portland and one in San Francisco. And so in Portland, we're taking on the theme of education, and in San Francisco, we're taking on communities. So it's really, right now, we're really thinking through how Du Bois has addressed those things with his project and what we can bring to it. And, the exhibition at Princeton in New York is obviously something that is important and coming up. And then it's a hard question. I would love to see this collected as a book and as a sort of single project book. But I'll put that out there in the universe if anybody's here who wants to do that.
Or know somebody who might want to do it.
Who wants to do that. But I'm waiting I can't wait to see, what the conversations are that come about, because now I find myself in a really vast world of lots of different people, from social scientists to architects to, this project really gets to like almost every discipline under the sun. And it's, that's, I'm just excited about what the exhibition will bring, especially in which you are curating.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's also just a testament to, Du Bois is not without his problems, but really a testament to a Black Studies methodology that he that endures as really productive for us in 2025 and beyond, considering the socio-political upheaval that we're living under right now and contending with every day. So I know that folks have been reaching out to you and saying like, oh my God, this is such a relevant project for right now, and it will remain relevant, I think, for some time, and was obviously at the forefront of Du Bois's thinking for the rest of his career. So I think it's time to take questions from the audience. I do want to shout out Dan Strong, who's in the front row, who is responsible for helping Will coordinate the catalog for this for the solo exhibition that's traveling around, and Jen from the Print Center is going to take questions, move the microphone around the audience for questions if you have any questions for Will and Shraddha.
Hi, love the addition. So while I was listening, you guys mentioned how Du Bois had community to go outward and research and collect all this data, and how data has been transforming and how the categorization and recategorization has gone through the years. I was thinking about what you made an example of the whole entire different graphic point with the categorization of race, mixed race, and the outdated terms used to describe other mixed race people. What data or information, sorry, give me a second, I had it written down. Can you give another example of what has been added to the infographic, to your infographics? Because I know doing field research, you miss things, but now that we live in a world where it's full of technology and data is at your fingertips if you can pay for it, things have been added and things have been taken away. What has been added to the infographics, and an example of what Du Bois infographics was missing as well? Sorry if that was too long.
I think maybe an interesting thing to talk about here is one of the visualizations we're doing in Puerto Rico. We were connected with a couple of researchers who are looking at colorism and race in Puerto Rico, and we ended up doing 2 visualizations based on their work. They do an annual health survey in Puerto Rico by phone, and a few years ago they were able to get a question added about skin color in addition to the question about race. And so they asked people to what their skin color was on a scale from 1 to 6, in addition to asking them what race they were. And when they put this in the health survey, they found that health outcomes were more linked to the skin color than it was to people's race identification. And that's one of the visualizations we're working on here at Powerhouse, but it shows how the race categories that are in the census don't really capture people's lived experience, and the biases they encounter, and especially in Puerto Rico, where, the term African American is not really something that Black people identify with. So we want to kind of bring those things out that, maybe that wasn't in the conversation back in Du Bois' time, but they are very much today.
Yeah. And maybe like one thing I would add is that so much of what the world was in 1900 and what the world of Black people in the United States is so unbelievably different. So, one of the tough things about the project is I think hands down Du Bois was able to show this really something super positive in progress. I mean, it's almost overwhelmingly like positive in most aspects. And where we're at is really strange because there's been so much progress, but there's also these sort of large systemic problems that are just deepening and you don't see, that you can see that they haven't changed, even though there's a flourishing of population, there's a flourishing of like an economy and all these other points that are sort of off the roof in comparison to Du Bois's time. But you see the systemic problems sort of follow each of those concerns and that he brings up, and how it just is fixed. It just stays in the DNA. You never see something kind of dissipate and not become a problem again or something,
Other questions? I think what's interesting about, or I think historical about what you just said is that segregation, right? So even though Du Bois's original portfolio is called a portfolio, from 1900 was cataloging Black life after emancipation and just after the failures of Reconstruction, but still Jim Crow laws and everything proliferating at that time, it was still a segregated U.S. And there are a number of historians, especially more recently, who have argued that segregation was actually could be said that it's productive, or at least, or maybe even fruitful for African Americans, because they were able to have these enclaves where they could thrive and have property ownership and kind of feed their own communities, and then integration happened. And so I think that's an interesting kind of historical break that might speak to some of what you're talking about with the kind of stagnation of progress.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, we have a question.
Thank you for this wonderful project. My question is about, if you can you think of like having the project tour, and I think it's really inviting to have like panels organized alongside with it, where you have scientists, historians, artists, scholars, and so. But it's also kind of, it sounds like it's overwhelming somehow, right? Because the bandwidth is of opportunity to actually expand it is immense. So how do you think about that? Or do you have plans on having this project discussed in context with others from other fields outside of the arts, but also outside of the data and going beyond that?
There are definitely initiatives. Jen, did you want to? I don't know if Jen wanted to say something, but we're definitely working on how does this travel, right? How does this get beyond New York City? That's one thing. The other thing I would say is that with Print Center, we are going to partner a little bit with the Cooper Union School of Art. Cooper Union for the advancement of science and art. I happen to work in one school of the three schools, has a civics project lab, and so we're hoping to coordinate programming with that place in order to bring in publics that, all right, may not be sort of specialized in any of this. And the other thing I would say is that the possibilities are there, and we're interested. And one of the wonderful things about printmaking, in this case, is the multiple. And it was one of the more important, one of the reasons why we chose to do this in printmaking, is that because the project can live in multiple places, and it can be in places and studied in multiple ways, and not have to rely on the one original. So.
Yeah, and I'll just add that so far, there are already multiple iterations of this that are planned, not just in terms of the portfolio, but the exhibition that will be at the Print Center in the fall, opening September 18th, save the date. And then there will be a symposium that same weekend that's doing exactly what you're saying and putting multiple people in conversations from different disciplines around this project and beyond, and around the exhibition itself and what this kind of practice might mean. I think that's a really important thing to lift up for what Shraddha and Will are modeling for us, is that that is also a kind of Du Boisian prompt, that this is a practice. It's not just theory. It's not just data. It's not this kind of like, they're not these necessarily like inane things or like something that you can necessarily like pin down and keep in one place. That it's a practice. It's evolving. It's embodied. It's collaborative, it's dialogic, and so that's something that we're trying to capture in the symposium as well on Saturday, September 20th. Save the date for that too. And then there'll be a book that's also part of the exhibition, so that's sort of the kind of, I won't say a minor life, but certainly this year of this year's life.
There's other things. There's other things.
Yeah, there's many other things.
Right now, one of the prints that one of the proofs that we've done with Graphic Studio that we showed here is an exhibition called Reverberations, which is at the Ford Foundation Gallery.
Right now.
And it's a show about design. I never thought that I would be like in the context of graphic design ever in like my life, but that it's really like a design exhibition. And Silas, who did a whole Monroe did a whole curriculum based on these original visualizations by Du Bois, and that's what brought him to our project, to be in a context of design.
And I think one more thing that I'd like to say also that I think is so beautiful about this project, and to your question, is that it's not necessarily a binary thing that, it has to be art, it has to be science, it has to be one person from data science talking to, it's actually the and that's that's in the Cooper Union title, but that you all have also kind of, that's come to the surface with working with this project, and between what you all share as skill sets, right? That art and science, humanities and science go hand in hand, and so we should really stop trying to break them up. Not that that's what you're saying, but thinking about them together and collaboratively and kind of in a fruitfully entangled relationship, I think is very important. So thank you for that question. I thought I saw another one. Did you have one? Oh, I thought I saw a hand up in the front row. We have time for one more question?
Hi there. Thanks so much. This is really beautiful work, and I love the mix of craft and science that's going into it all. I had the question more around what has been your process, the design process as you're working together, and has that kind of informed a politic or certain questions that keep coming up as you're working? And thank you as well.
So we usually start the visualizations with a question, that we're trying to answer, and then I go out and find the data and usually come up with something like a bar chart. And Will says, I don't want, what can we have? How can we mess this up? And that's where we start.
Tired of bar charts. So yeah, it's interesting because and then from there it's like, how far can I push the visual? But I'm also always looking for how does like for just the image this here, how do you sort of take that data or that subject that we're talking about and immediately make it feel, even if you haven't read through all the text that's on there or even the title, you immediately have some sense of where you're going, that you're this is a tree, this is a family tree. So that's where my mind is kind of going, and we often get stuck in the math. We often, with the squigglies I was talking about, is sort of like, okay, I just want to make squigglies, but then I had to divide the squiggly into kind of pie charts to represent the math of each, how many of each race is in this thing. So, so then I have to go back to the drawing board and figure out, like, graphically how that gets done. And it's an interesting question, because then when we're in the print shop, right, with the printmakers, that question also then goes under another type of scrutiny, right? Like in terms of how do you make this matrix do something that your drawing is doing? The conditions of printmaking, how does that end up doing something that your drawing does? And then does it obscure the math? And we go on and on.
Well, I encourage you all to look through the artist proofs to see the ways that they navigate the balance and the dance that this project calls for between art and science, as well as individual and collective, and artist and printmaking workshops. So thank you all so much for your attention today. And I think Jen has one more thing to say.
No, just thank you again so much. Let me stand in my spot. Let's do a round of applause. I'm so glad I got asked to introduce this, because this is like so interesting to hear the three of you talking together, and it makes me really, really excited for what we're going to do this fall. And you all already did all the promotional print center stuff, so I don't have to do anything. I just have to say we'll see you in September 18th for the show, Data Consciousness. If you are a person who knows people who might be interested in participating in some way during our season of programming, one thing I think Print Center does super, super well is take our show and then through our public programming and educational programming kind of do the same kind of spur action that maybe happens in the show with all the different types of work that's in there, and creates kind of this discursive, complicated set of ideas around a project. And that is what I would love to see. So if you know any people in any field who might be interested, or educators in any type of class that might just want to have a class in our space, like, we're open to everything. This should be using the privilege of our space on 24th Street to keep this project in the discourse all season and beyond. So thank you so much for being here. Please make sure that you see those proofs in the back if you haven't already. And the room will be open for a little bit, so please hang out. Please feel free to chat with Will and Shraddha, and please come talk to me. And if you know someone who wants to take this show on the road, also come see me. I have lots of business cards and I want to talk to you. Thank you guys so much.